Hello and welcome to the classic Hollywood movie you should know. I'm your host Nate Washburn, and this week the movie is from 1939, Gone with the Wind, starring Vivien Leigh, Clark Gable, Olivia de Havilland, and Leslie Howard, directed by Victor Fleming, produced by David O. Selznick, and released by MGM Pictures. Now, Gone with the Wind is one of the most famous movies of this era. It tells the story of Scarlett O'Hara just before the Civil War, and then the Reconstruction post-Civil War era. It gets billed as a romance, but I find that's kind of a bad description of the movie. Yes, there are a lot of romantic elements, but this movie's an epic. There are comedic elements, there's a lot of drama, there's action, there's suspense with the war and Reconstruction, and Scarlett is one of the most dynamic heroines of this era. She's manipulative, she's funny, she is sexy, she's charming, will do whatever it takes in order to make sure that she survives and thrives. Now, the performances are great throughout, but I would argue that the women completely outshine the men. I mean, Vivien Leigh plays Scarlett O'Hara. She was a British actress. This movie put her on the map for American audiences, and she won a well-deserved Academy Award for her portrayal of Scarlett. And it's really one of these great performances that is almost hard to believe. You know, you watch the beginning of the movie when she's the pampered daughter of this ultra-wealthy family, and then you see her in the second half of the movie when the family's lost everything, and it's almost hard to believe that it's the same actress. And then Olivia de Havilland plays Melanie, who's sort of the soft-spoken, she's sort of the reserved one. She's like the backbone of the story. Like, the wildness of Scarlett gets paired nicely with the steadfastness of Melanie. Now, Gone with the Wind actually had a couple of directors. It was originally assigned to George Cukor, who you might remember from last week's Born Yesterday. Now, David O. Selznick, there's two stories of what happened to Cukor. One is that David O. Selznick was upset with how slow and methodical he was. He was spending too much money, so he fired Cukor. There's another story, which might be apocryphal, that Clark Gable didn't like Cukor because Cukor was a closeted homosexual and focused most of his attention on the women and on their performances versus the men, so that he talked to Selznick and got Cukor fired. But in any case, Cukor gets fired, Victor Fleming replaces him, and he's the one who gets the sole credit for direction. Now, what's incredible, though, is that Olivia de Havilland and Vivien Leigh evidently went behind Selznick's back and kept getting coached by George Cukor, which I really think does help in their performances. Again, their performances are incredibly good, and they're better than the men who were working with Victor Fleming. Now, Gone with the Wind is problematic in its depiction of African Americans. The movie was made again. It was released in 1939, so this is during the Jim Crow era. So it's insensitive with its portrayal of like the happy slaves, the dim-witted slaves. It got called out even back when it was premiered. But what is to note is that Hattie McDaniel, who portrays Mammy, she won an Academy Award for her role. She won Best Supporting Actress. She was the first African American nominated for an Academy Award, and she was the first one to win. Now, Gone with the Wind had its gala premiere on December 15th, 1939 in Atlanta, Georgia, and it went on to break records everywhere for attendance, for tickets sold, for profits. The production costs were $3.9 million, and it grossed $32 million, which was a record at that time. Now, it was re-released a couple of times, and it always made money, and cumulatively, if you adjust for inflation, and Guinness Book of World Records has it as the highest grossing movie of all time. Now, in the Academy Awards 1940, Gone with the Wind was nominated for 13 awards, and it won 8, including, again, Best Actress for Vivien Leigh, Best Supporting Actress for Hattie McDaniel, Best Director Victor Fleming, Best Picture, and it got 2 honorary Oscars for a grand total of 10. Now, a little trivia for you here. So Victor Fleming replaced George Cukor as director of Gone with the Wind. Previously, he replaced George Cukor as director of The Wizard of Oz. So in 1939, Victor Fleming had 2 huge movies that he got sole directing credit for, The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. Also, come July of 2018, Olivia de Havilland will be celebrating her 102nd birthday. She is the only surviving cast member of Gone with the Wind. So if you're a fan of epics, if you're a fan of romantic movies, if you're a fan of dramas, if you're a fan of strong female performances, check out Gone with the Wind. It's one of the greatest movies ever made. It's well worth your time, and it's this week's classic Hollywood movie you should know. I'm Nate Washburn. Keep watching.